and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my November and December wrap up. If you're wondering why so many of my videos recently have been squished together, don't ask. Just accept this offering that is content. So yeah, November was a weird month. I read one book from my Top Trumps TBR and then just picked up a whole other bunch of books instead, as you do. Yeah, I thought I would just go through November's wrap up and December's wrap up because December was much better. So let's start with Believe-a-thon. Believe-a-thon was a middle grade readathon hosted by Gavin, obviously, and I read a couple of middle grades actually specifically for the readathon. The first was Tunnel of Bones. Now, I wasn't going to continue with the Cassidy Blake series, but it was on Scribd and it was an audiobook and it ticked off more than one prompt, so I just went for it. Tunnel of Bones is a V.E. Schwab middle grade about a young girl who can see ghosts. She goes to Paris, she goes to the Paris Tunnel of Bones, and you guessed it, she comes across ghosts. In the first one, she goes to Edinburgh. It was just mediocre, and Tunnel of Bones was mediocre too. I gave it 3 stars. It's a middle grade that has ghosts. The next book that I read was Pinch of Magic. That was, again, another middle grade. It, again, hit a bunch of prompts. It was a really sweet middle grade, actually. I was pleasantly surprised by this one. This is about 3 sisters who are all stuck on an island and have a pinch of magic. They have a little bit of magic because they are descendants of a witch. A little bit of a spoiler. They go back in time and learn some more about their heritage. And it's a really kind of fun, sweet middle grade adventure. Doesn't take span over like centuries, it's over literally like a day or two. There's a jailbreak, there's all kind of shenanigans, but it was a really heartwarming middle grade. And there are 2 more in that series, so inevitably I'll probably pick up the next couple in another Believe-a-thon. I really enjoyed that middle grade. I thought it was a really sweet little read. Would definitely recommend. And then the last middle grade that I read was Scribblewitch. Now, I was reading this with a student of mine who I was teaching to, like, not teaching to read, but a student that I read with. Sometimes I do tutoring just to earn some extra cash. Obviously that ended when COVID kind of lockdown came into full effect. So I finished this on my own, and this is a really sweet story about friendship and kind of bridging those gaps when your friends are taken away from you or there's something that comes up. It's a really sweet, fun little read. Essentially what happens in this one is there is a young girl called Chloe, and she finds out that her best friend is moving schools, and she's heartbroken because Chloe is her only friend. And just as she wishes that her friend could stay, the Scribblewitch appears and gets her into loads of trouble, and then she gets herself out of trouble, but she's still really sad that her friend has to go. So it's all kind of her coming to terms with the fact that sometimes your friends will move away. That doesn't mean they're not going to be your friends anymore. And like I said, it's really sweet and really heartwarming. And but yeah, I think I gave it 3 or 4 stars in the end. I'd probably a 3 star because it's not something I would desperately read again, but I enjoyed it. It was cute. And it's what I needed after what turned into be not a good reading month. Speaking of not a good reading month, I finished the Shadow and Bone trilogy by doing the Siege and Storm and Rise and Ruin back to back. I was so disappointed with these as a trilogy. I know that obviously you'll have seen, if you watch my content, you'll have seen my video where I reviewed all the different series that I read, and this was just not good enough. YA fantasy tends to do this thing where if there isn't a lot of plot to develop, they will just move characters from place to place, and that's an awful lot of what this is. There's an awful lot of it where they build up an army to lose it in one chapter, and it's not even necessarily that they're using it at like different elements of it. There just didn't feel like there were any stakes in this, and everything is just moving around and pieces are just moving, they're just chasing each other around a board. It just felt really contrived, and I just really didn't enjoy it, and I was really disappointed. I have heard that Six of Crows is better, and obviously I really enjoyed Ninth House, but this just didn't do it for me. So I'm unhauling this series. I'm giving it to my cousin because he does like some like YA fantasies, so I'm hoping he will get more enjoyment out of it than I did, but I was just overall really disappointed with this series as a whole. I just thought it was boring, and yeah, there just wasn't, I don't know, there just wasn't enough for me to sink my teeth into. I felt like there were so many opportunities to really bed in with those morally grey characters, but there was almost a fear that by making Alina too morally grey, she wouldn't be able to redeem herself, and it was just, so it just made it boring. It was just too safe. It was a very paint by numbers trilogy, and yeah, I read some fantastic trilogies this year. This just wasn't up there for me. I also finished A Court of Wings and Ruin, which I did as an audiobook. Again, I felt like the first 2 books in this series were fantastic, but this one was just another one where they just built it up and nothing really happened. They were moving from place to place. They were building up their army, and then their army got destroyed. But then there was Ex Machina, and then there was Here Comes the Cavalry, and just all these real cheesy cliches that just kind of ruined it for me. I was really enjoying it, and then it just completely fell flat at the end. I was really, really disappointed. I will be reading the 4th one when it comes out. I am excited for that, mainly because I want to see what happens with Nesta, but it wasn't my fave. I still think A Court of Mist and Fury is my fave from that trilogy, and if the 4th one is pants, then I'll be really disappointed. I also read Heartstopper Volume 3. I liked this. It was cute. It looked at some serious topics. It obviously looked at eating disorders, bullying, homophobia. I mean, Nick's older brother can just get in the sea. But I really enjoyed this as a sequel. I thought it was really interesting. But there wasn't really much to say about it. It's such a nice little story that there's not really much to go into. Like, I just enjoyed it. So I'll just leave that on that. So I then read I finished Soulless. I'm really sorry, Caroline. I enjoyed elements of this. I enjoyed the mystery elements of it. I enjoyed the sexual tension between the 2 main characters for the whole 2 seconds there was sexual tension before it was just, you know, sexual, I guess. That last chapter really threw me. I just could not break through the way the language was built up. So because it's set in a Victorian England, the writer has tried to create a Victorian English vernacular in this, and it just didn't work for me. And it just felt really contrived. It felt really silly. And it just meant that trying to get through to the actual story and the characters and those elements that I enjoy was hard work. And I don't want a book to feel like hard work. So I can see why lots of people really enjoyed this. Had all the elements there, it just wasn't for me. So you'd think that I'd have a really disappointing month, except then I finished The Black Flamingo, and I did that in a weekend, and that just sealed off November for me. It was just the perfect kind of cherry on top of what was, you know, potentially going to be a really bad reading month. Just made it at the end. This is about a young gay man coming to terms with his identity, going to university, exploring facets of himself that he hasn't been able to explore before. It's really fun, it's really sad, but it is beautifully written. It is a quick read because it's novel in verse. But it has this really heartwarming ending with an alternative ending as well, which I also really appreciated. I would highly recommend this. Of all the books that I read in November, this was it for me. And this was also the only book from my TBR, my Top Trumps TBR, that I actually read. And it's because of that that I had to do 2 punishments in December. So when coming to my December wrap up, that's what we're going to start with. So I didn't get to Enchantment of Ravens. I just didn't have time. I didn't prioritise it, and I didn't finish The Count of Monte Cristo. I am 500 pages in, which means that this book is longer than even my longest book in the rest of my TBR, and I just haven't finished it, and I don't know if I want to DNF it. I feel bad DNFing it, considering it was literally a punishment book. So I know that this torture is torture that I brought up on myself. It's also the reason that I didn't force myself to read An Enchantment of Ravens, because at the end of the day, if this was hard enough, what was the point of doing 2 wildcards, even though I picked 2 wildcards? So Enchantment of Ravens, I will carry on into January. I don't know if I'm going to even bother trying to finish this. The story of Count of Monte Cristo is about a young man who comes back from sea. He finds the girl that he loves, he gets a promotion, he gets his family back, everything is going really well for him. And a whole bunch of guys in his area decide that who likes to see someone having a good time? They decide to betray him and set him up to look like a Napoleon agent. Loads of people conspire against him. There's 4 or 5 men who conspire against him, and they basically destroy his life. He ends up going to prison. He's there for like 7 years. He meets a bishop or an abbey or someone like that, who then says, you know, if you go to this island, if you go to the Monte Cristo island, there's all this treasure, but no one believes them. And that he realizes in prison that these guys have set him up. And that's only the first 200 pages, because you see it from everyone's perspective. Everyone gets a little say in this book. The reason it's 1200 pages long is because apparently you have to know what everyone is thinking at any given moment. It's too goddamn long. I easily could have turned that first 200 pages into 10. Easily. It could have literally started with him out of prison, putting those pieces together, because everything you learn in those 200 pages, they then spend the next 800 pages breaking down as he then goes on to destroy everyone's lives. So basically, the part of the book that I haven't quite got to yet is him coming to having some revenge. The bit that I got to, he has just rewarded someone for giving him some truths that he kind of knew already, and then after that he starts like collecting essentially stuff to blackmail the guys that destroyed his life. And now that I know what the story is, I am intrigued by it, but I just know that it is going to take too goddamn long to get there. So I'm thinking, I know there's a couple of like film adaptations, maybe I'll just watch those instead, but I just, not only was this going to be an intimidating read, I just really haven't enjoyed it, which is a shame because I really like Dumas's writing. Usually, I really enjoyed The Three Musketeers and The Man in the Iron Mask, but this just isn't doing it for me. And ending a year, like ending a trash year on this absolute brick is just not the one. So I don't know if I'm going to commit to finishing this. I might just do another 500 pages in January and call it a fucking day. I don't know. In the comments below, tell me what I should do about this book. If you think I should just DNF it, I'll just DNF it, because I don't know who I'm trying to prove this to anymore, because I put this as a punishment. I feel punished. 500 pages of this was a punishment. I feel done, but I also started listening to the audiobook. I still have 30 hours of the audiobook left. Like, do I just grin and bear it? Do I just get it done? I haven't decided. So leave your thoughts in the comments down below and let me know. I didn't quite get to his feminism. That was purely because I bought myself a copy through Gardeners, and then I sold my copy, and then this copy arrived today. So I haven't had a chance to read it. I've only got 2 days left of the year, so probably won't get to read it. So that card will just go back into the pile and I will try and get to it again this year. I'm really excited for this. This is looking at feminist essays written by women of colour. I am really intrigued by this. I've got really high hopes for this, and I've heard really good things. So I am excited for this. I just didn't get to it. And then Mosquito Land. You guys are really just gonna let me think that David Arnold and David Almond were the same person. Really? I've been saying this is the guy that wrote Skellig. It isn't. I've met David Almond, who is the guy who wrote Skellig. Not this guy. This guy is an American. David Almond is a Brit. Actually, well, yeah. No, he's a Brit, isn't he? I think he's Scottish. He's a really nice guy. He writes beautiful stories that make me really cry. This is also really sad for very different reasons. Not the same guy. I'm halfway through, as you can see, so I'm just about halfway through with this. This is about a young girl who runs away from home, tries to find her mum, and loads of shenanigans come from that adventure. But she also, there are themes of severe mental health issues. There is sexual assault in this. I don't know what else I'm going to find. This has been an absolute roller coaster. And again, not the book I wanted to finish 2020 on, but here we are. I've got 200 pages left. We'll get there. But I'm really enjoying it. The writing style is really easy to, like, it's quite accessible. Narrator is very sassy. She has this kind of sarcastic, dry wit that I really appreciate, but she is going through the absolute ringer, and I really hope this has a happy ending, because at the moment it's so sad. But would definitely recommend it as a YA. If you like contemporaries that focus on mental health and adventure and sadness, I would recommend it. It is quite good, but it will make you cry. Wasn't on my list originally, but I read Piranesi. I did this as a NetGalley review, and for the first 60% of the book, I could not tell you what this book was about. It was only when it ended that I was like, oh, of course. So if you're like me, where you're one of those people where you're like, oh, well, I'll read the first couple of chapters to see what I think, you'll have to either read the whole thing or not bother with this one. It feels like a historical fantasy, but I can't tell you if it is. It's about a man who lives in a labyrinth, but he doesn't call it a labyrinth and doesn't really realise it's a labyrinth until the end. And there's a whole bunch of other things that happen towards the end, but I don't want to spoil it for you. So if you want your brain scrambled like an egg, Susanna Clarke, she did it again. I actually really enjoyed this, and I've posted this out to a friend of mine who also enjoys having their brain scrambled, so hopefully she'll enjoy it too. But what was this book? Couldn't tell ya. Enjoyed it, but couldn't tell ya. We'll leave that there because I haven't got a clue. No Country for Old Men. I put this in my worst of the year. Really didn't enjoy it, and I'm now really nervous about reading The Road. I can see why people think Cormac McCarthy is a good writer, but he's not an enjoyable writer. I didn't enjoy reading this. Sugar was the only interesting character, and he was the villain. The main characters, the good guys, were so boring and so bland, and it just, I know there's subtext, and I know there's stuff that I'm meant to dig deeper into. I just didn't care to. He spent more time describing the weaponry in this book than he did describing any of the characters, and I need a character that I can latch onto that I'm interested in, and Shergar just wasn't in it enough to do that, and he's the main villain. He's in most of it, and he still wasn't there enough for me. It was just kind of boring. It felt kind of flat. The first few chapters had me on the edge of my seat. It had me feeling genuinely tense, but the ending was just boring. And the main character died off screen. What was the fucking point? What was the point? Would not recommend, really didn't enjoy it, and will be unhauling very soon. And then A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. I did this as an audiobook, but can we just take a moment to talk about how beautiful this hardback is? Disappointingly plain on the inside. So this is, it feels Moroccan. The author is West African, and it definitely has those kind of elements to it. There's a lot of this that really reminded me of Morocco, and kind of just like the foods that they eat and the smells and the architecture around them. Just, it has that inherent feel. It was a beautifully written book. It was really interesting, kind of taking those stereotypical YA tropes that I was expecting to see and turning them on their heads slightly. I really liked the mythology that was embedded in this. I really liked the characters in this. I really like how the characters came together and the kind of the dynamics between those. I thought that was really cool. I don't really have anything negative to say about this book. I really enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away, but I really enjoyed it as a whole. I thought it was a fantastic fantasy, and I'm really intrigued to see what happens in the next one, because of reasons of things that happened in the book that I can't talk about without spoilers, but you got me intrigued. But the book that I've been so excited to talk about is Legendborn. I finished this last night. It blew me away. This is an Arthurian retelling with a whole cast of diverse characters. Your main character is clearly a girl called Bree. Her mother has died in a car accident, but she thinks it might be murder. And she goes to university and she discovers these secret societies, and she tries to work out what happened to her mother and unravels this entire fantasy world that she knew nothing about, right under her nose the entire time. It was fantastic. It was everything that Cassandra Clare wishes her books had been. This was just so good. It was so gripping. The action was really dynamic. The characters were fantastic. They were sarcastic when they needed to be. They were wholesome when they needed to be. There wasn't a single character in this, even the villains, that I didn't like. I thought everyone was fantastic. It was so well written. I got so excited reading this that it made it onto my top 10 of the year. What a way to end the year. Just, this was great. This was great. I've already sold a copy of it to my friend Priscilla because, quite frankly, I think it's fantastic. So if I still have copies of it available, the link will be down below. If I can sell any of these books to you, this is the one. This is the one that I just feel like, take this away with you, because it was just so fun, so dynamic, and I love a bit of Arthurian legends. You don't see enough retellings of Arthurian legends. It tends to fall by the wayside, but I just thought this was fantastic, and I cannot wait to see what happens in the rest of this series. So that's it. That's my wrap up. She's gonna do her little, I don't really need to because I'm not really posing for a thumbnail, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Oh god, she's gonna drop them. I'm definitely gonna drop these. There we go. So that's it. That's my books for the last 2 months. Let me know what your best and worst books of December and November were. Let me know if you've got yourself any bookish resolutions as well. Resolutions, because I'll be filming that video next. I'm really excited for 2021. Fingers crossed it's better than this hellfire. And other than that, I hope you have a nice day. Now she's gassy. Oh, that was a little bit sick. Yeah, so let's start with Believer. Don't act like you didn't do that on purpose. We both know you did that on purpose. City of Bones, was it? City of Ghosts? Must have been City of Ghosts, because City of Bones is a very different series. I can see why people think Cormac McCall